Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Explore. JR here with you. Excited today because I get to talk about what I did yesterday, which was go to the committee meeting, the House Ways and Means Committee meeting that was at Allegheny Wood. I was invited to come. Thought it was super cool to see the government in action. The first person that came up to me was one of the representatives from Georgia, Drew Ferguson. Him and I chatted a little bit. Talked about small business, how it was so important in the United States. And then, everyone filed in. There was representatives. There was one from California, New York, all over the United States. So it was super cool seeing all these representatives here in West Virginia. Carol Miller, she kicked it off talking about West Virginia and, of course, West Virginia issues. And they had said that this was the first meeting since the Republicans took over the House. So that was pretty cool to have their first meeting since the election here in West Virginia. Some of the high points that they talked about, or low points actually, was that in West Virginia, inflation is at 15.1%. Which means that most people are spending an extra $7,000 a year. Now, when you think about that amount of money for West Virginia, that's unreal. Let's just do simple math. If you make $27,000 a year, it's now like you only make 20. So that's because there's an extra $7,000 that you have to spend. That's automatically coming out of pocket. So that was unbelievable. The gas has increased 42% in West Virginia. So that was some of the low points. Some of the high points that they like to, some of the people like to say, I don't think of it as a high point. I also think of it as a low point, is that there is 2 job openings for every person out of work. Now, I know a lot of people like to say the unemployment's at its lowest rate ever. There's still like 64% of people working. I don't think that takes into account the people who just literally are still getting benefits, who are still sitting at home, not looking for work. Because obviously, with there being 2 job openings for every person out of work, there's a lot of jobs that need to be filled, and we just cannot get the workforce to come back and go back to work since the pandemic. So there was a lot of talk about that. Alex Mooney said that the inflation was a huge struggle in West Virginia, and that it's actually hurting the starting of small businesses, which are very important. And because they're afraid to take on loans, of course, interest rates are higher now. And it's just kind of putting the small business startups in flux. People are just a little bit more nervous. So then after all the kind of preambles and introductions, they went to a testimony. And they had 4 people that were doing testimony there. One was from Allegheny Wood, Tom Plogger. Cheetah Bees, our very own Ashley Bachman, was there. Wiley McDade from Devil's Due Distillery, and Jamie Ward from Consol Energy. And they each talked for like 5 minutes and told about the plights and the problems that we're having here in West Virginia now. Tom Plogger, he talked about what Allegheny Wood Products does, and also talked a little bit about how in 2017, when we had the trade wars, how AWP was affected. And then right after the trade wars, we go into the 2020 pandemic and a whole new set of challenges. So the 5 problems that he really saw were: 1, fuel costs. That's for everyone. Supply chain, labor, meaning being able to find it, interest rates, and then the regulations, which we all know for some reason Democrats love putting on regulations. I haven't really understood that all quite yet, but it's like regulation after regulation after regulation. It makes it really, really hard. Ashley Bachman then gave her testimony and talked about the COVID shutdowns, what they had to do to stay open. Also, the rising costs of food, and how it makes it hard because, of course, when food costs rise, you have to raise the prices on the menu. And she was a little worried that if she prices the food too high, you're going to scare away business. And that is an issue. I'm facing that myself right now with the rental business. And I decided not to raise my rates, which makes it very hard because what if I get less people? Then I'm going to go into the hole this year. So I'm taking a huge gamble that by not raising my rates this year, I'm hoping to get more brides. Fingers crossed, we'll see. She talked about with the rise of inflation, you also have less customers coming in because now their dollar's not stretching as far. And, of course, supply chain issues were an issue for her as well. Right now, to get employees, you have to pay higher wages. But when you pay higher wages, that means lower profit margins, which anyone who owns a business, small business profit margins are really slim. Really slim. So when you raise the wages, it really goes into cuts into those profit margins. And she said that a lot of employees she has are actually using her restaurant as a second place of income. It has gotten that bad. So that was very interesting testimony from Ashley Bachman. And then next was Wiley McDade, and he's out of Jefferson County. He's the one that owns the distillery. He talked about gas costs. Before the pandemic, you had plenty of product choices. But then after the pandemic, they had to scale back their product choices. He talked about a glass shortage for him, the grain costs, what it's actually causing, his distillery having to raise their prices. And then he said something that was really, I'd never heard it before, that some of the companies are increasing the minimum amount that you have to order. So what they're doing is they're having to order so much in advance that you're paying this huge upfront cost, and it's making it kind of hard because it's like, okay, say I had to order 5 glass jars to begin with. Now the companies are saying you have to order 15 glass jars or we won't deliver. And so that's making it harder to do with upfront cash. And then he also talked about the problem with that is sometimes you can take out loans for that, but you're getting credit that is hard to get. So it's inaccessible to some people. And of course, with higher interest rates, it's very hard to take on those extra, loan payments that you would have to do. Then next was from the coal industry, Jamie Ward. He talked about how the coal shutdowns have really hurt. He had to go to Alabama when his coal mine was shut down to go to work. And, of course, he says all of the policies, of course, are really threatening the coal industry. So that was really, really neat, hearing from the 4 giving their testimony. And then it opened up to all the representatives to ask questions. And there were a lot of good questions. And the first one that someone asked was, if you had the ability to write the law of the land, what would you do to make your life easier? And I like that because a lot of times we want to complain. I saw it on Facebook. People were complaining why they weren't there. Listen, if you can complain, everyone can complain. Can you give a solution to the complaining? And so it was very astute of this gentleman to ask, what would you do to make it better? Because you never know who might have a great solution. And the first gentleman said, take care of inflation and take care of fuel. The fuel, I think, is very easy to take care of. We were energy independent through the previous administration, so we can get there again. We can lower our fuel costs. The problem about taking care of inflation is we have printed so much money, and there's so much money chasing so few goods that causes inflation. How do you stop inflation? You have to raise interest rates. I was going to college to be an economics major, and the first thing they always taught you is when you have high inflation, whatever your inflation is, interest rates really need to be at that level. That's what stops inflation. So if we're at 10% inflation, our interest rates really need to be at 10%. And the Fed has been very wary of that. They've just been inching it up a little bit at a time. But honestly, it's going to hurt. I think you just do it like a Band-Aid. They should have put it up to 10% right away. Yes, it's going to slow things down, but you need that to take care of inflation. You've got to do it. And we're just kind of prolonging it. So I'm not real optimistic about the inflation really settling down until next year, to be honest with you. That's kind of my thoughts. Then also, Ashley Bachman said the fuel costs as well, what they would try to do to make life easier, and unemployment benefits. Now, unemployment benefits are something that they're a double-edged sword. When I lost my job 13 years ago, before I started the business, it's actually what brought me into starting the business. The unemployment benefits kept me afloat. I was able to chase my passion. So I see the need for unemployment benefits, but there's people that know how to play the system. How do you stop that? So that would be something that's a great thing. So you bring up unemployment benefits. How do you quash that where someone goes in and works the minimum amount of time so they can come back out and just sit at home and collect unemployment benefits? So that's a good point to bring up. Someone else said, just make the people go back to work. I have it. Let me see if I can find it in here. I took 4 pages of notes. Someone said, was it on the last page? Bear with me here. I'm so sorry. Yes, here it is. There are still 18 million non-eligible people collecting Medicaid benefits, which is not only health, but there's money involved with that also. So what you have is people that pre-pandemic were not eligible for this, so they had to work, are still collecting benefits, meaning there's 18 million people that could be in the workforce. If those benefits were taken away, 18 million people are forced now. I either got to get a job or I'm in trouble. So I think that would be a good start, is getting those 18 million people back to work. So that's why I don't believe, truthfully, I know how they do the metrics for unemployment. I know that they just take the people who are looking for jobs or on unemployment assistance. So there's 18 million people out there that can join the workforce immediately if those benefits are stopped. So I'd like to see that happen. The gentleman from the coal company said, we got to get inflation under control. But he also said, and I loved this, we need to focus on high school equipping people for real life in the workforce. There are some kids that do not want to go to college. And I tell you what, I don't blame them. College is the biggest scam on the face of the earth. Unless you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, and then to some degree, it's still a scam. I just hate to tell you the costs are too high. But for the people that don't want to go to college, I don't think high school is doing a good enough job to equip them to hit the real world and work. So I liked his point. We need to do something. I know the Chamber of Commerce here in Greene County, we tried to work with it just slipped my mind. That's old age. With the VOTEC, sorry. We tried to work with the VOTEC to get people to go more into trade fields, because there are so many jobs needed in the trade fields that it would be great to see people do that. So high school is very important. I think we're just kind of, instead of doing gender stuff, why are we not teaching the kids stuff that they need in the real world? The next question was about labor force participation. And they said that it's supposedly the same. Labor participation right now is the same. I think it was like 0.4 percentage points off of what it was pre-pandemic. But why does it still feel like people are being paid to sit at home? That was an excellent question. I don't understand that. Being in as a person that hires, sometimes I'm just shocked at, like, where are the workers? You'll see people on Facebook saying, hey, where can I get a job? And everyone posts anywhere. And I don't get it. I don't know if the people looking for jobs are just ignorant to the fact that everyone is hiring, or it's just kind of a thing that you put out, hey, I'm looking for a job, and then you can tell the unemployment office, no one, I can't get a job. I don't understand that, because when someone posts that, I'm thinking, Pilgrims, American Woodmark, every grocery store, every fast food restaurant, the pool, the city, they're all hiring. We cannot find workers. So it just feels, there's a feel to it, like people are being paid to sit at home. Now, maybe that's not true, but it still feels like there are people just sitting at home not working. So that's something that we had to have to work on. Then the next person asked, what is the greatest challenge to keep educated people here? That's a good question. I'm going to give props to someone, and Dr. Leslie. He chose to stay here, the younger Dr. Leslie. He got an education and chose to stay here. How can we get more people to do that? Get the education and come back here and stay here in West Virginia. And so they were like, we need to create higher paying jobs. And one of the good things about being a business owner, and maybe it's a bad thing also, because I look at it the lens of, come back here and start a business. Get your degree in whatever. I mean, you want to be a doctor? Fine. Come back here and start a private practice. You want to be a lawyer? Fine. Come back here and start a private practice. You want to do physical therapy? Fine. Come back here, start a private practice. Instead of going elsewhere, you can still make decent money here. Find something that's not being done and do it. And you can still make money here. So we got to keep these kids that are graduating, we got to bring them back here, but we do need the higher paying jobs to kind of entice them. They talked, which I did not know this. They asked the coal person, gentlemen, what's the difference between metallurgical coal and thermal coal? And this is what he said. Metallurgical coal, they mine to get the carbon, but thermal coal, they mine for electricity. You learn all kinds of things at these meetings. I hope I'm not boring everyone, but there was just so much information coming in. I found it super interesting. They asked Allegheny Wood what it was like exporting during this time, and they were really hit hard during the trade war because there were retaliatory tariffs. 25% automatically put on what they were exporting. And they're still struggling with supply chain issues. If you go back on Explore Grand County, I think one of the first ones we did, my brother and I talked about the supply chain issues and containers. If you remember that and watch that, they brought that up. They said we cannot find containers and vessel space to export. They were having an awful time at that. It's starting to kind of get better, but not totally. And so I thought that was cool that my brother and I talked about that. I'm almost positive it was the first podcast that we ever did. Let me see what else. Oh, they asked, is there enough work opportunity in this part of West Virginia? And someone answered, yes, there is plenty of work, but there is a lack of motivation to find it. It kind of goes back to just people putting on Facebook, hey, who's hiring? Everyone. Just drive by a store and stop in. You'll find a job opening. One of the questions that they asked is, what would attract more capital? And someone said more write-offs. Now, I want to talk about this because it is a pet peeve of mine. Everyone complains about businesses getting so many write-offs. I am a business owner. I will tell you flat out, if I was not able to write stuff off, I would not be here. Flat out. I would not make any money. It would be the end. You'd see probably, if there were no write-offs, half to 3/4 of the businesses automatically shut down in Petersburg. So everyone just takes it from these mega corporations. Oh, look at the write-offs that they get. It trickles down to the small businesses too, and the small businesses need those write-offs to survive. Without those write-offs, all you're going to have are the big businesses. And then they set the price, they set the product. And the thing about small businesses, we give back to our community more than any big business. More than any big business. I know every business around here, when you go in and ask them, they try to help whatever organization you're trying to get donations from. The big businesses don't care. Listen, I just did Rockin' New Year's Eve. The small businesses, like that. The big businesses, it's like pulling teeth. Well, we can't afford this, yet the small businesses out there making a fraction of what the big business gives willingly. So the write-offs are very important. I did find out they said that unemployment in West Virginia was 3.1%, which sounds awesome. And it is awesome. But here's the problem. There's only 54.8%, so just say 55% workforce participation by the people, which means there's 45% that are choosing not to work. That is the number that you got to pay attention to. You got to pay attention to that. So there is definitely the job market is exploding. It is out there. The jobs are out there. Even with all the layoffs that you hear of some of the bigger corporations to doing, they can just go to another job because the jobs are numerous. They talked more about supply chain issues. This was kind of funny. Ashley Bachman said that a case of lettuce that used to be $32 a case is now $100 a case. Now imagine that uptick that much. Imagine what they have to do to recoup that cost. It's hard. It is hard. Then you have gas prices out there that just keep raising things. And another issue that she was having, which we always talk about this. I went to a restaurant to eat, and just so no one knows what restaurant it is, they didn't have an item that they should have. And I'm like, okay, I can't eat here. That's the item that you should have. I'm not going to say who it was. And so we got up and left, and we went somewhere to eat. And I was like, you can just stop at Shop and Save and get that item. But here's the problem, and Ashley brought it to attention, is that it's more expensive at Shop and Save than when you get it from your supplier. Okay? So when I get my ice cream down at the pool, I get it from a supplier. It's cheaper than if I went to Shop and Save and tried to buy ice cream. So there's that extra cost. If you can't get that supply in, I remember during the pandemic, the SpongeBob ice cream that is our best seller, we couldn't get it in. Just couldn't get it in. They're like, oh, we have Spider-Man and Batman, but not SpongeBob, so you couldn't get it in. So let's say that was my main item. That's what the pool was known for, the SpongeBob ice creams. And I went to Shop and Save and bought SpongeBob ice creams, but they were $4 more a box. And I try to sell it for what I was selling it for, my profits shrink even more. So the supply chain issues are hurting in that way as well. It's hard to get items to come here locally. Let's see what else we have. Like I said, I took a lot of notes, a lot of questions. Are there issues with housing? And someone said that there was an availability issue with housing. There's just not enough housing. But now they feel that it is the pricing of the houses. That is a tough one because I see a lot of people going around buying up houses to rent out. And I do know that some of our younger kids now, if you talk to like the millennials, they are choosing to rent more rather than they are buy. Which I don't know if that's just like they were brought up that way or they just feel like a house is a waste of money. I just know growing up, it was always just a huge deal to own your own house. That's what you worked for, to try to buy your own house. So it's kind of changing. But I think the problem is you have so many people honing in on that rental market now that they're buying up all the houses. Like a house comes on the market and they're buying it because they're going to do apartments or flip it, or not flip it, but just change it to rent out. That when a person wants to come buy a house, it has jacked the price up so much. I don't know how you stop that. I don't know if there's a good balance. I don't know if that will balance itself out eventually, that now when these millennials start having kids, their kids are going to be like, I lived in an apartment all my life. I want my own house. I don't know if it'll be too late by then. I don't know. But that was the question on the housing issue. The other thing that they brought up was young people not working due to not being able to pass drug tests. And the drug epidemic in Grant Hardy County is just, it's awful. It's awful. We all know it. And they're saying that some of your workers, you just can't get workers that have to do a drug test. I was talking to one of my people that runs another pool, and they said, listen, we're having trouble getting young kids to be lifeguards because they can't pass the drug test. And I'm like, that's the state of affairs that we're in. So some of the workforce out there is just not able to pass a drug test. So it's hard to get them to come to work, obviously. Let me see. What else? Oh, the one guy up there, the one gentleman, and I don't remember what representative said it, but I loved what he said, and it is a problem. He was talking about the growing crisis amongst our youth. And he said, and he was an older guy, I'd put him 60s. And he said, when I'm the youngest guy in church, that's a problem. And that struck me. It's the truth. It's the truth. Parents, we need to do a better job of getting our kids in church. Let me just tell you one thing. As long as I lived under my parents' roof, I had to come to church. There were no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you're not doing that as a parent, you're failing. There was no questions. It was like, it's Sunday, church. Wednesday, church. Saturday night prayer meeting. You're coming to church. And the thing was, if you don't like it, you can move out. Okay, sorry. Apologize about that. My daughter, she's homeschooling. I love that. She can do it herself. And knocked over all of her pencils and crayons and everything. So I've lost my train of thought, but I do know I was talking about church, and we need to get our kids back in church. And he went on to say, and I loved what he went on to say, that the most important election in a community, the most important election is for school board. We need to get Christians on the school board. I'm talking sold out Christians. We need to change the system from the inside out. And I wish I knew what the guy's name was, because I was like, boy, I like what this guy is saying. It's important. So you got to make sure that you have young people in church. You got to get them there. We need to do better. They're getting bombarded in school with all this nonsense. The Grammys last night was a train wreck. I'm just looking at some of them, the way they dressed. The whole Sam Smith thing was a debacle. Your kids are getting bombarded. We need to do better as parents. Where they talked about reliable broadband, which we all know It is important in this area. I think it was Ashley that went on to say she was actually losing sales because of not reliable broadband. Her point of sale group that she uses says that you can do it when the internet's down, but it's just not taking for some reason. So when the internet goes down and people use a credit card, which most people do, she's losing those sales. So broadband is so important in our area. We've got to get that straightened out. And I know the commissioners are really working on it. I've been talking to Mr. Riggleman, and they're working hard. The next thing that they talked a lot about supply chains, and some of the hard things that they were having trouble getting. They asked, where does it come from? And it's shocking that most of the stuff came from China and they were having issues. I heard someone say today, I was listening to it on a podcast, matter of fact, and they asked, do you own slaves? And the guy's like, well, no. And he says, yes, you do. And the guy's like befuddled. And he's like, I don't. And he goes, look at your phone. And he looks at it and he goes, slave labor built that phone. Look at your shoes that you're wearing. Slave labor built those shoes. And he's saying, you own slaves. We need to be careful about what products we buy. And it just totally opened my eyes to a whole new thing of like, we want stuff so cheap. I remember, and for all of you that are a little older, you'll remember this too. When you bought an appliance, it was made in America. Now, the thing was, it was expensive. We knew it was expensive. You had to save up to buy it. But that fridge, that dryer, that washer, that stove lasted for 25, 30 years. Now, I've been married for 10 years. I'm on my third dishwasher. Guess where they come from? Country begins with a C. So I don't think you can say anything against China on YouTube or they'll cut you off. I'm not sure. We'll see. I just said it. But yes, that is an issue. We need to start making stuff in the United States again. That would stop the supply chain issues. And then another gentleman, it was actually the guy from Allegheny Wood. He said, I have to say one thing. He says, we have a bunch of C students that work here, but they are not afraid to work. And I just love that. Everyone cracked up. And I'm like, you know what? Grades, we harp on grades. And yes, I want my daughter to get good grades. And I push her to get good grades. But a work ethic is more important. Business, you want to know what would scale back these colleges? I'm going to tell you that I hate to tell you, business and college, they're in business together. Because you do not need a degree to be a manager. I'm sorry to break it to you, whoever you are out there, of saying that you have to have a 4-year degree to come be a supervisor or manager at our place of business. You need to get over yourself, because you don't. You don't. There are people out there who are born for business. They are born for business. They can do it without a degree. We don't need a degree to be a manager. You don't. And so that is some of the things that I think is funny. There was always a joke, and it says, what do you call a gentleman who got a C in med school? Doctor. C, B, A, still a doctor. Now, we could always say that I'm not sure if I want that C student, but I tell you what, there are some C students that just don't like school, but know stuff like crazy, super smart. So I thought that was interesting. A bunch of C students, but they're not afraid to work. Never be afraid to work, kids. Working will get you far. Then they went on to say this, and I didn't know, because I didn't know anybody but Carol Miller that was there. I didn't know any of the representatives. Only one Democrat from that committee chose to come to the meeting. That's a little bit disappointing. You know, it's getting to the point where we're so bipartisan, and I know everyone wants to rag on the other side. I understand that. But the gentleman said, when the Democrats held the majority, we still showed up to every meeting. And if that's true, I applaud them. For the one Democrat that came to West Virginia, I applaud you. I hope your state does well. Really do. For the others that chose to look down on West Virginia, well, I don't know. Maybe some of us will move to your state and vote you out. The one thing that I did hate, though, and it was a lot of the representatives asked questions. Did a terrific job. Loved it. I mean, they really wanted to know. But what I hated was the politics. You got some representatives that used their 5 minutes instead of asking questions of their panel, just went on a rant against the Democrats. Enough of that. Enough of that. You know what? If you're a Republican, that's great, but I'm not just beholden to the Republican Party. If you're just going to go on a rant for 5 minutes, you need voted out. You were there to ask questions, not to go on a rant about the opposite party. I feel that way about both sides. So I am blasting Republicans now. You know what? Do better. Just do better. Stop being a partisan hack. Allegheny Wood brought up a good point. And he had said, and I don't know where it's at. I don't know all the jobs. But he say, so we start out here at $14 an hour. We offer a 401k and a health insurance upon hiring. But he said, the problem is we're competing against the government, which the government's bigger. We're competing against the government to get employees who want to sit at home and collect a paycheck. That is a good point. I never thought of that. You're competing against the U.S. government for money. You're always going to lose because we all know that they just take our money. And I do think that we need a total overhaul of the welfare system, of the unemployment system. I know that's more of a state level, but we need a complete overhaul. I'm not saying that we shouldn't help people, but I believe that you help people who are helping themselves. If the local person is working as a janitor at X business, doesn't matter, just whatever business, and they're struggling to support their family because they're only making $9, $10 an hour, I have no problem giving them help. To people who are just out there popping out babies, I have a problem giving help. So I think we need to help those who are willing to help themselves. So I like that. Competing against the government for money, most of the time you're going to lose. And then they talked about energy costs. They need worked on. I don't know what we do with energy costs. I think opening up drilling again would help. I think nuclear would help. I was listening to a podcast, Ben Shapiro, this week, talk about we need to go back to nuclear energy. It's safer now. It's cleaner now. Unemployment benefits need to be decreased. We need to work on them, and we need to work on fentanyl, which I agree. And that starts at the southern border. We've got to get that under control. And I think some of the representatives realize that. Let's see what they can do. And then the last nugget that I have to pass on, the home affordability right now is at its worst point since the 80s. So that's a long time. That means houses now are not as affordable as they once were, but back in the 80s. And if you remember that, you were kind of during the Carter years, going into Reagan, the economy was a mess. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you had a gas shortage also, but I think inflation was at 18%, if I'm correct on that. It was just terrible. It was terrible. So that is my takeaways from the Ways and Means Committee meeting. It was very interesting. I loved being there. I want to thank all of them for the invite. It was by invite only, and there were only certain people invited, and I do want to thank them for allowing me to come. It was special. it was nice to see the government in action. I liked that. And I hope that they take it on the road more. They said they want to go out and see the real people. It's super cool that they came to Petersburg, West Virginia. And I hope that the House of Representatives goes around to all pockets of the United States to see and hear what the people are saying, because I think it helps. So I'm anxious to hear your comments below. I know a lot of people were upset because it wasn't an open meeting, but this was not a town hall. This was a hearing, basically, and the four gave their testimony. So that's why it was by invite only. But it was nice. It was a lot of good information. I felt like most of them were very down to earth. I mean, I told Ashley, she was super busy. Super nervous. And I told her, I said, listen, they're just people. That's all. Once you get that into your mind, you can speak in front of everyone. They're just people like you and me. Even rich people. I know, they're just people like you and me. The super rich. Imagine that. So maybe it's just because I've always did public speaking. That stuff doesn't faze me, because you listen to them, they stutter too. They make mistakes. They try to read and have trouble pronouncing a word. It's everyone. We're humans. But I did like it. So that's my takeaway. Sorry this was so long. Maybe I'll split it up into 2 parts. I don't know. We'll see. But everyone, hope it was informative. Hope you enjoyed it. Check us out. Explore Grant County, Tucker County. We have a whole bunch of them. The main one is Explore Grant County, though. So everyone have a great day.